Whoa, that was some talk by Ali. And imagine, as a client, I'm supposed to follow him. I was sitting there and wondering whether I should actually do this presentation or invite him to have a duel with me on the stage. Then I said, okay, you know what? He said, client is not the king, and I know I'm not the king, so I might lose the duel, so might as well not invite him. Great. But having said that, I want to share with you one insight that I picked up from him. Here is a creative guy who used a lot of numbers on his presentation. And I am supposed to be the number nerd who is an SVP of Insights in a client organization called Unilever. And you're going to find only 3 numbers in my entire presentation. Now, those creative types who actually sit there and say, I don't believe in numbers, I want you to really focus on those 3 numbers whenever they appear in the presentation, because those are the only 3 numbers you need to know in your life when you're dealing with clients. So, my subject today is all about putting I into insights. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the word I stands for individuals. Now, why should we even think about talking about individuals when we have 7+ billion people in this world, and we as a company are a mass marketing company who produce products and goods to sell to the whole world? We strongly believe that the world around us is changing so rapidly that if we don't understand the individuals, we are going to be in a bit of a mess going forward. And why do I believe that? Here are some things that you might want to look at. If you go back to the 1960s, the age pyramid is represented by the black line, and today it is more like a pentagon. All that it means is that the world, in terms of just demographics, is actually getting polarized quite a bit. So if you're going to say that, okay, listen, let me focus on the bottom of the pyramid, which is the teenagers, and actually go after them because that's my key market, you might probably miss out on a lot of opportunities that are emerging, which are actually quite sizable when you look at an emerging demographic pyramid. And the same thing is true for income too. We all know that the world around us is actually becoming incredibly polarized in terms of income. Let me give you a simple factoid for you to think about. If you take the top 85 richest people in this world, their net worth is more than the bottom 45 countries in the world. That is the extent to which the world is getting polarized. In the last 5 years, the top 1% of the population in the US accounted for 90% of all the incremental wealth that was created in that country. And I'm sure the statistics are pretty similar in a whole lot of countries. Now, if the world is getting polarized, can we be actually talking about the standard middle in a typical normal curve? We cannot afford to do that. We need to think about how do we actually look at the shoulders, because the shoulders are becoming bigger and bigger, more and more important with every passing month. And you would have heard this term that the world is moving east and south. I have some news for you. Back in the 17th century, the world was actually, the economic center of gravity was actually in the east and the south. It actually moved to the west, and then now it is moving back to the east and south. But in that kind of a context, there are millions and millions of people who are becoming prosperous. How do we talk to them is all going to be very different from the way we are doing it today. So if I have to summarize all that in one simple word, what we are talking about is a world that is actually de-averaging, and we cannot be focused on an average strategy. An average strategy will give you anemic growth rates, and therefore we need to look at the fringes a lot more today than ever before. I genuinely believe, therefore, that the averages are dead. Head on fire, feet on ice, on an average I'm feeling okay, is not what anybody would believe in. So if that is the reality of life today, then how do we actually start looking at a de-averaged world? And more importantly, why are we actually looking at aggregates even now? There are millions and millions of research studies that come back to you and tell you, on an average, people feel this way, and it is higher than the average, and therefore you should go, and so on and so forth. So that whole notion of looking at aggregates is actually going to become less relevant going forward. The reason why I'm saying all this thing is because our firm belief is that marketing as we know it today has a very finite life. And you saw some examples from the previous presenters, Steve and Ali, which talk about how differently marketing is evolving, how content is going to be created differently. And in that world, if we believe that marketing as we know is today has got a finite life, then what do we do as marketers? We will be communicating to people at an individual level. And you might say, how is that different from what we used to do in the past when we used to put an ad on television and people used to sit and watch? They are consuming the ad at an individual level. But what is different today, given the technology that we have, is that we would be able to customize communication to people at an individual level. And that is the fundamental difference that is going to make marketing that we know today becoming a little bit obsolete with every passing month. And all that is going to happen during the course of next 5 to 10 years' time. Can we figure out a way in which we can put the individuals back into insights and not look at aggregates? And that is going to be the biggest challenge that is going to face the insights industry. But it is not all gloom and doom. You know, you're going to wonder, how are we going to actually understand 7 billion people at scale? You know, here comes technology to our rescue. You know, we at Unilever, we have invested a fair amount of money and thoughtware behind understanding individuals. We have invested a lot of money in setting up what we call as people data centers, where we try and understand individuals as individuals. And this is not for just, for the sake of understanding people, but with the ultimate objective of, can we get to a stage where we can actually connect with people at an individual level with content that is relevant for that particular individual. And I don't want to talk about all the examples, but then just a couple of examples that pop up in my mind is a site that we created in partnership with Google some time back called All Things Hair. And this is a YouTube site and a Google site. That enabled us to really understand at a fairly deep level what are the emerging hair trends that are coming out. And this is understanding data from individuals as opposed to analyzing data at an aggregate level. This helped us to come up with product innovations that would be ahead of its time, but that's the only way you can stay competitive. Would this have been possible 2 years ago? Probably no. But is it something that is actually working? Yes, it is. Do we know how to scale this? We have to figure it out. But if you don't figure it out, marketing is going to become much more challenging. The third example that we have is what we did with the People Data Center in Ben & Jerry ice cream. In Ben & Jerry ice cream, we have an annual event called a Free Cone Day, where in different strategic locations, we offer people a free cone of Ben & Jerry ice cream. A lot of people turn up. But you're not doing sampling just for the sake of sampling. You're doing sampling to generate some sustained behavior on an ongoing basis. Now, we did this experiment in UK. With all the Odeon cinemas, we offered people a cone of ice cream free, but then we actually put in some big data analytic capabilities into our People Data Center to understand what people were tweeting about the Free Cone Day and where exactly there was a red spot where there's a lot of conversation going on. And very quickly, we also brought in our EPOS sales data to figure out wherever there was a huge amount of conversation going on, where we also selling more. And sure enough, we found that there were 3 or 4 Odeon theaters around which there was a lot of conversation, but people were not buying ice cream. And we could unearth all these things in less than 2 hours of start of the Free Cone Day program. And in 2 hours' time, we actually picked up the phone, talked to the local salesperson to understand why there was no uplift. And he said the problem is, in the retail outlets, the largest selling SKU was out of stock. And in a couple of hours following that time, the out of stock problem was fixed. And suddenly, when the EPOS data started coming in towards the end of the day, we actually found that we could see some sales uplift happening. So that's going to be the power of data, which is going to incredibly influence the way we actually do marketing going forward. That made us think about what is going to be the model of marketing going forward. We believe the model of marketing going forward is going to be around content, which is creative, which is impactful, which connects with people, and use that content to connect with people at the most appropriate place, at the most appropriate occasion. And you do that by understanding people through the data that they actually offer and mine that data to come up with big insights. And it's not just about connecting people with content powered by data, but it's also about how do you power e-commerce so that we can actually close the loop and make the whole thing an incredibly seamless experience for people. With that as a background, what we know is that brands are built one person at a time, but the challenge that we all have is how do you build brands one person at a time at scale? But then comes the big eternal debate. The big eternal debate is how do we actually do this activity? The scale versus customization debate is something that goes on a daily basis. People say it's all good to customize, but we are a fast-moving consumer good company who sell at scale. How do you do customization at scale? The reality is it is not scale versus customization. We don't have a choice. We have to figure out a way in terms of figuring out how do you do customization at scale. And to do customization at scale, we first need to start by treating people as people and not just consumers. It might sound like semantics. And the reason why I'm saying that understanding people is important is because people are consumers of your product categories for probably 2 or 3 hours in a day. Other 21 hours, 22 hours, they are just being human beings. They have hopes, anxieties, aspirations, and worries. How do you understand those things so that you can find a meaningful role for your brand in those other times when they're just being people? And that is going to call for understanding people's emotions. And it's easy to say that, you've got to go and understand people's emotion. But the reality is that very rarely people can articulate their emotions very clearly. And I agree with Ali about, focus groups. When you have 6 people or 8 people sitting in a room, they do give you very valuable insight. Don't get me wrong, it has got a very clear role in market research. But if you really want to understand deep emotions, maybe some of the traditional things that we do are not the right way of getting to the real emotions. People do struggle to articulate emotions time and again. The reality is also that when you ask people, they will have an answer. Because if they don't have an answer, they look like idiots, right? So they don't want to look like idiots. So whatever question you have, you ask them, they will give you an answer. Now I want you all to go through a simple exercise now. I'm going to show you a questionnaire. In your own mind, administer this 5-point scale in your mind. I'm interested in going for long walks, agree, disagree. I'm interested in cooking, agree, disagree, and so on and so forth. I can probably think of 20 more questions like this on which I can ask you a 5-point question. You can all answer these 5-point questions if I ask you those questions. It's not a big deal because I made it simple for you. The question that I have for you all is, how many of you use this question before you propose to someone? Yeah, very rarely we do this kind of detailed analysis of compatibility before you actually go and propose. Some of the biggest decisions in life are taken on the basis of how you feel emotionally, what your heart says. And there is a connection between the heart and the mind, which is usually quite difficult to understand. Once you know those two things clearly, that's how you take major decisions in life. If you're taking major decisions in life based on what your heart tells you, why would you do it a little bit differently when it comes to taking decisions on understanding people's emotions? So therefore, what we believe is that there is a strong paradigm shift in people understanding that is required. Now, I can say that there is a paradigm shift required, but then here comes technology to our rescue. And to some extent, even Hollywood comes to our rescue. Go back to the 1960s and 70s. A lot of you would have seen Star Trek and, the flip phone. And we all thought that that was cool. But now you have an iPhone in your hand. So somebody dreamt up a big idea and it became reality. So technology is changing it incredibly rapid pace. Then you go back again to the same 1960s and 70s. You had Jetsons and the robotic vacuum cleaner, and what you have today is iRobot, which cleans your house when you're away from the house. Somebody dreamt up something, and that actually became reality today. In that kind of a world, the only thing that we can say is that the pace of change will never be this slow ever again. And we all need to get used to a situation where we are rapidly evolving as human race, and more specifically marketeers. And when it comes to advertising testing, again, Ali said, no testing would ever tell you whether an ad is going to succeed or not. Yes, if you ask consumers, they might probably not be in a position to articulate whether they like the ad or not. But that's exactly why you need to think about testing a little bit differently than the way we have been doing it in the past. I just want to show you a simple ad on Axe and how we actually tested that.
Make love, not war, with new Axe piece.
Now, if you had used some traditional methodologies to really understand what segment of the ad worked and so on, we would have come up with a totally different set of conclusions. But when you started using things like facial coding, you actually were able to get a much deeper understanding of what components actually worked well and how it triggered people's responses. We've done probably a few thousand advertising testing with facial coding as a technology. Was it there 10 years ago? No. Is it scalable today? Absolutely. Is it going to change the way we do advertising testing? For us, it has certainly changed. What else do we do to understand emotions of people? The other way of getting to what people are actually thinking is to actually go where people are thinking, which is their brain. If you go and understand how people are thinking, you need to go to the source, because there is something called a filter, the proverbial filter between your mouth and your brain. When you ask questions, that filter kicks in and it gives you a rationalized set of answers. But when you go to the source, you get a completely different set of responses. Just watch this video.
The industry has believed for years that buying is an entirely rational process. We know now that this model is out of date and that non-conscious emotion is the basis for guiding purchase decisions. As we live in an increasingly competitive world, the bar is now higher than ever. We need to use the best tools in order to make communications that break through the clutter and engage audiences on an emotional level. For years, you've been relying on your eyes and your gut to evaluate your messaging and communication. The data that neuroscience provides can actually guide marketers and agencies on exactly what to change using second-by-second diagnostics. So what are the tools of consumer neuroscience? EEG, biometrics, eye tracking, facial coding, and traditional self-report. While no single technology has a monopoly on the truth, the brands that will be successful are those that leverage these tools to create great content and understand how to apply it across all media platforms. Consumer neuroscience technologies guarantee you will deliver on an emotional level.
Again, when you look at technology like this has actually helped us to understand how symbols are processed by people, and that has enabled us to create better communication and content that connects with people both at a heart level and at a mind level. I don't want to talk about this in the interest of time, but to do all this, you also need to really augment it with being close to the consumer. Unless and until you experience what consumers go through on a daily basis, it is impossible to actually connect with them. Because let's all accept it, people sitting here in this room are not necessarily representative of the entire population that lives in this country or in this world for that matter. They have completely different sets of needs and wants. How do you actually experience what they go through? I'm not saying that you have to listen to what they're going through, but we need to experience what they go through. without which there'll be absolutely no empathy. And if there is no empathy, whatever you produce is unlikely to connect with people in a big way. Now, connecting with people has always been a fairly expensive task. In the process, it ends up being, I do, as Ali said, go and sit in a couple of focus group discussions and come back. And, he says, I don't get enough inspiration. But if you turn the table around completely and then say that, okay, listen, instead of you going to consumers, can I bring consumers to your desk on an ongoing basis? So that every time you find that you're not having enough inspiration, I can bring a consumer and you can have a chat with them, not about the idea that you have, don't evaluate the idea that you have, but talk to them to understand multiple dimensions of that people. So we have the wonderful technology called Discuss.io, where wherever you are in the world, we can bring a consumer to your desk in a matter of about 15 minutes, sometimes it could take an hour, but then you have an intense conversation with them without leaving your office. Now that technology has actually increased consumer centricity within our organization fairly significantly. And the last technology that we have over there is a technology called Watch Me See. Because you ask, as I said earlier, if you ask consumers what they do, they will tell you a set of things that they do. But actually what we did was, we give them a glasses which looks no different from the glasses that I'm wearing. And you tell them, okay, do your laundry, do your cooking, do whatever you're doing the normal way with these glasses on. And when we compared with what we asked them and what they actually did, it was chalk and cheese. And that's when suddenly the penny dropped, saying that, look, consumers probably don't know how to articulate what they actually do. You can ask them questions, but then maybe that they're not telling you the truth. It's not that they're telling you a lie deliberately, but they don't remember the truth. And it is not the most important thing in their life. Let's accept it. Doing a market research survey is probably not the most important thing in their life, just as watching advertising is not the most important thing in their life. But then if you make it easy, they tell you exactly what they are actually doing. And we have a process here to do more and more of those things.
Across Africa and Asia, we need to explore new ways to engage with people in these markets. One of the key challenges is that the primary device in these markets are basic and feature phones. And with that comes a primary form of communication, which is text-based messaging. For us, the challenge was, how do we answer the question of what's for dinner tonight?
At Digital Genius, we are building artificial intelligence combined with natural language processing that allows us to automate tens of thousands of real-time conversations.
We're working with Unilever and wider Knorr team. We've built Chef Wendy.
A user can simply text the ingredients they have at home and immediately get a response with the dishes they can cook. This has also allowed Unilever to build a very big database of personal profiles of many customers that they can now use to push targeted campaigns of their new products.
This system has proven to be overwhelmingly successful, with engagement being far higher than with other digital channels. Even more, we're reaching and crafting relationships with people we had no access to previously.
Now you get an idea of what we mean by one-to-one connection with people. And the day one can do this at scale on a global basis, that's when you actually start building brands in a different way. What you saw here was an incredibly powerful artificial intelligence technology. And there is a machine that is actually chatting with people. And when you watch this whole conversation unfurl, you actually are quite amazed by the fact that the machine can think so strongly and so logically. And the person at the other end doesn't even realize that they're actually chatting with the computer, because it's a very human way of communicating with people. It is not a dull and boring way of doing that. The world of artificial intelligence, again, if you really want to understand where the world of artificial intelligence is headed, you just need to go back to Hollywood and see what they have to say about we saw that, Star Trek and Jetsons and stuff like that, whatever they produced in movies at one point of time, they're reality today. So what is the fiction that they're thinking of today which could potentially become reality tomorrow? I don't know, this is a 2015 movie, I saw this clip. As you start the clip, can you please raise the volume a little bit? Yeah, so this is a clip from a movie called Ex Machina. It's a 2015 movie. The story is about a robot which has got incredible artificial intelligence. Over a period of time, it actually develops a strong sense of emotion too. Watch this clip, and it falls in love with the creator.
Here's something else I wanted to show you.
Okay.
Looks a bit creepy. You might wonder, is this just a figment of some Hollywood director's imagination who was probably smoking something at the time he created? Probably not. Probably not. The future, in our view, is right here. And I want to show you another video of a robot that is not a concept, but it is actually a reality, and it has got incredible artificial intelligence. And guess what? This is a robot that we are in the midst of negotiating with them to buy, and it can do a lot of things that otherwise, we would have employed a human to do this. Watch this video. So I would like you to introduce you to Pepper. I was planning to bring Pepper live on stage, but unfortunately, for various reasons, we couldn't bring it. So what we have is a video of Pepper interacting with a person. Watch this.
Hi, Mark. Welcome home.
Hey, bud.
How was work?
It's okay. Just happy to be home now.
Mark, you seem a little down. Did something happen today?
It's just a really long day, Pepper, and to make matters worse, my date tonight canceled.
I'm sorry to hear that, Mark. What a bummer. At least it's Friday. Should we find something else for you to do tonight?
That'd be great.
Dan Miller, Jason Smith, and Matt Kelly are available to chat right now. Should I get them in a group chat?
Say, what are you guys doing tonight? Let's see where some of my other friends have checked in and see if there's any events going on nearby.
Ted Nevins checked in at Neville in downtown Boston. He says, catching up with good friends. Anyone in the area, come join us. James Dietrich is seeing Aerosmith at the House of Blues and tagged himself and 3 others in a picture. Allison Banks just checked in at the Scully, 2 miles away from here.
Why don't you send her a message letting her know I'll be there? Say, see you there in a few minutes.
You got it.
I'm gonna go get ready now though. Would you mind having an Uber car come pick me up in about 30 minutes?
I'll alert you when the car has arrived.
Awesome. Thanks, Pepper.
How about I play your Spotify music while you get ready to go out?
Sure, that'd be great.
Accessing your music now.
And this is not the robot that is going to cost you a few $100,000 to buy. It costs less than $20,000 to buy. And imagine when this thing happens at scale, there is going to be an incredible amount of price efficiencies kicking in, and it could become an affordable product that a lot of people will have at home. The eyes of the robot are actually facial coding recognition machines. They actually are constantly monitoring your facial reactions. Now, I was just talking to Stephen before he came on stage, and he was telling me that the whole artificial intelligence space is developing so fast that a bunch of companies are getting together to create a code on how far they will push the boundary and when they will stop, because they're actually worried about artificial intelligence taking over human intelligence at some point of time if it is not self-controlled. In fact, interestingly, while we were talking about Harvard artificial intelligence over the last 6-7 months, the latest issue of Harvard Business Review actually talked about Meet Your New Employee. A lot of repetitive tasks could be done by artificial intelligence and robot. And this is something that is a bit concerning, but at the same time, it is a future that we have to confront with and figure out how we can leverage it to understand people and their emotions a lot better. So in 2020, if you have to imagine, the conversation is not going to be about art versus science debate. I think that's going to be so yesterday. The conversation will be more around science matters. Again, Stephen's presentation very clearly articulated how science is being leveraged to actually influence art in a big way. Science is going to matter. In fact, to some extent, science is going to inspire art going forward. And you certainly saw quite a few examples of that in the first presentation. But these are the 3 numbers that I would like you to look at. For some of you, you might sit there and say that testing kills creativity. I have some simple piece of news for you. We've tested a whole lot of ads that have won Cannes Awards and Effies and so on and so forth. The ones that win always test well. They always test well. So it is not that they kill creativity. The ones that test well always end up in selling more products. The maligned methodology called advertising testing, is something that we need to probably get over it a little bit. for one simple reason. It is how you use the testing that is more important than what you do in the testing space. If we as clients, if we are going to be spending billions of dollars, there has to be accountability at some point of time. It is good to say this is a fabulously creative piece of work, but if it doesn't sell, it is worth nothing. It is not even worth the paper on which it is printed or the film on which it is made. So there has to be an accountability, because at the end of the day, we cannot be pissing money in the air and say that, okay, that was a nice piece of creative, but it didn't sell, so what, let's move on to the next creative. Creative is means to an end, just as insights is means to an end. If we don't do that, we could be in trouble going forward. So, given that, we within the insights function in Unilever have a very different vision for the function as such. And the vision is something that you see on the screen: inspire and provoke to enable transformational action. Nowhere in this vision we are using the word insights. And that is deliberately so, because again, just as I believe creative is means to an end, I also believe that insight is means to an end. And if we don't think about how we are going to inspire greater creativity, how we are going to provoke people to think beyond their comfort zone, how we can drive transformational actions, we have failed in our duty. And when we thought of this vision for the function, I couldn't help thinking about what we did in the context of what Stephen said. He said, Beatles and Pink Floyd are people who have been to Abbey Road Studio number 1 and actually have composed songs. I just wanted to say that, okay, there is another group that actually went to the Abbey Road Studio, and that is the insights function of Unilever. Just last July, we had 100 people from the insights team who are there actually in the Abbey Road Studio, not virtually, physically, singing a song to the tune of Here Comes the Sun, and the lyrics were aligned to the vision and mission of the function. And that actually transformed the way people thought about what role they can possibly play in their daily job. And the way they're doing their daily job is essentially a transformation which involves a bit of a from and to. And I want to walk you through a few from and to. What we don't want to do is predict the future, because if you take the past to predict the future, it is a little bit of incremental thinking that gets built into it. What we want to do is to actually provide inspiration so that we can shape the future. And that's what inspires creativity. What we don't want to do is just generate insights and deliver it to people and say, here are the insights, do what you want. But what we also want to do is to actually drive outcomes in a fairly significant way. Because at the end of the day, if the outcomes are not there, don't know why we turn up for work. It's not about risk mitigation, and that has been the historical mindset of the function. If you focus on risk mitigation, then you become a risk-averse person who become a naysayer fairly quickly. And naysayers, again, to go back to Ali, they kill ideas even before they're born. What we want to do more and more is help people to imagine the world of possibilities so that they can be at their creative best. Tried and tested tools, they have a very strong role in insights function. I'm not belittling the importance of that. But at the same time, given the rapid change of technology that is happening, if you don't come up with innovative approaches to understand what people are actually thinking instead of what people are actually saying, we could be an irrelevant function fairly soon. And today, with the technology that we have, we can actually get to those things fairly quickly. Instead of just studying consumers, how do we actually help in understanding and building relationships? Because at the end of the day, building relationship is the only thing that is going to matter if you want to create a sustainable brand that is going to generate profits and have a strong brand love with consumers. So the evolution of marketing, as we see it, is back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and probably in the early 2000s, it was all about marketing to people. With technology making such a big impact in the marketplace, it has become more like marketing with people, because people have taken control over the brand a lot more than we ever thought before. But we also strongly believe that it's not going to stop here. It's not about just people having control over the brand. What we need to think about is how do we move to the next stage where we will actually start mattering to people. Because in a cluttered world, when people have a lot of things to do, watching advertising and talking about brands is not going to be the primary preoccupation of people. If we don't matter to them, we don't exist. How do we actually matter to them in their daily life? And that, to a large extent, is all about how we think about our brands and so on, which is one of the primary reasons why we at Unilever always talk about brands with purpose. If you don't have a strong brand with purpose, you might find that you're irrelevant relatively quickly. And that is dictating how we think about brand architecture and so on and so forth. Functional benefits, emotional benefits are table stakes. If you don't matter to people, you're probably not going to be there in business in the long run. So some of the things that we do here, for example, Unilever Bright Futures, particularly in South Africa, which got launched relatively recently, it's all about understanding people, what keeps them awake at night as human beings, and how can our brands play a role in making their life a little bit better on a daily basis. So that's what we're trying to do. It sounds like a fairly daunting task. So you could turn around and say there are too many moving pieces, and if you have to do all these things, it's going to be absolutely impossible to do all those things because the bandwidth that people have is finite. And can we actually make all these changes happen? Whether we like it or not, we might think the changes might not happen, but the changes are happening all around us on a daily basis. We have two choices. One is let that walk past us and get left behind, or be part of it and actually shape that change as we go along. The word impossible is actually an incredible word. A simple thing like an apostrophe can change the word impossible into I am possible. And if we walk in daily to our work with that mindset on I am the one who's going to make it possible, I am the one who will change the world, I am the one who will make a little bit of difference to make people's life a little bit better, that's when we actually start creating brands. And understanding people as people is going to be the foundation on the basis of which marketing is going to be created. And that's how we're going to be mattering to people. Thank you.